making its way back into the woods now.
Yeah, I think I ate about 17 pounds of grass.
Well, you can see it's all gnarly and chewed up and ripped up here where the bears have been raking it with their claws and biting it with their teeth. And if you come around to this other side, you can actually see the claw marks on the side of the tree here.
Oh, wow. Look at that. And why do they do that?
Well, it's a scent marking behavior. We don't know exactly sure, but we think it's a sort of a territorial marking behavior that they do.
So this is my area, keep out?
Yeah, and sometimes I think their backs just itch, so it feels good
Yeah,
too.
sure.
If you've ever watched a black bear climb a tree, they actually, they'll use their jaws to help them climb.
Oh.
So they'll actually bite the bark of the tree, like sometimes big cottonwoods have really thick bark.
Yeah.
And they can grab the bark with their teeth and then lunge up with both paws. And so they'll bite and kind of go up like that.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. And that's specific to black bears, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking you guys shouldn't try that at home because your teeth are going to fall out. That is great that a bear's teeth are that strong.
Yeah, and grizzly bears can climb too. Some people think grizzlies can't climb trees. They're perfectly adept at climbing trees. They just don't have to because they're grizzly bears.
They're the top of the line, right?
Yeah, who's going to make them climb a tree?
Nobody. Not me.
Hey, Melissa, come look at this.
What do you got?
It's another rub tree, and this one's got hair stuck all over
I
it.
want to see that. Can I get around you?
Yeah. See that little fuzz right there?
Oh, man, look at that. Wow,
hair,
that's cool.
Hair is really important to bears because it keeps them warm.
Yeah, I would assume.
But it also, when they rub, it sticks to the sap on the tree, And what's neat about hair is if you can pull the hair off and get the root of the hair, you can identify individual bears by the DNA in their hair follicle.
Wow, that is so. Individual bears can be identified just from a strand of hair.
Yep, and that turned out to be a powerful research tool because back in 2004, Kate Kendall, who was with the U.S. Geological Survey at the time, used that method, going around and collecting hair off of rub trees to actually estimate the population of bears in the park.
Yeah, and so just by looking at rub trees, or was there another way that they collected the hair?
Well, they also put out barbed wire hair snag enclosures with the bait, but by using both methods, they made the total project much more powerful. A really good population estimate for the whole Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. So it's really quite an impressive tool.
Do you remember how many grizzly bears were in Glacier?
Well, they didn't look at glaciers
Oh, okay.
by itself because Glacier's part of the bigger ecosystem. We're only about 2 miles from the park boundary right here.
Okay.
And so a bear that is rubbing on this tree can easily run across the boundary and rub on a tree out there. So it makes more sense to look at the broader area.
Yes.
But she estimated in that broader area, which was about an 8 million acre area, there
Oh
were
my gosh.
765 grizzly bears at that time.
Okay, and that was in the 90s.
That was in 2004.
2004. Okay.
Sometimes bear tracks can be hard to see when the ground's hard, but if you look close, you can see a bear track right here. This is a front track. So this is his palm right there. And then you can see the toes right here, like that, in the snow. And I can tell this is a grizzly because there's a straight line between the pad and the toes. So if you can draw a straight line without touching the pad or the toes, you know it's a grizzly bear. And typically, sometimes you can see imprints from the claws that stick way out in front of the toe. So usually they're a couple inches out in front of the toe on a grizzly bear. Black bear, the claws will be tucked in close to the toe because they curve in. So if we look back, you can see some more back here. Here's another one here. You can see that big space between the pad and the toes there, and a little imprint from a claw right there.
All right.
Oh, Melissa, you walked past this hole.
Yes, I saw the hole. Am I supposed to do something?
That's a bear hole. That's a
What?
grizzly digging right there.
A grizzly did that?
A grizzly did that.
No way. Oh
So
my gosh.
picture in your mind a grizzly bear. What do you think of?
Just those claws?
Those claws and that big shoulder hump. That's what they
Yeah.
do. They call them nature's rototiller.
Yeah.
And this is why, because they spend a lot of time just digging, looking for roots and corms down in the soil. These kind of dry south-facing aspects, a lot of times you'll find biscuit root.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yep, and it's got a big root like a starchy, almost like a potato.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
yum.
they'll dig those out and eat them, and so they're always looking. So when a bear's traveling along a trail like this, they'll see a biscuit root and they'll stop and dig the roots out.
So, John, I've just always kind of been curious. Like, you think about those big, huge brown bears in Alaska, which I know are the same as grizzly bears. It's just like here in the same species. But you think of like them eating all the salmon, and they're huge, and they kind of just rumble around. And I feel like the bears here, when I'm here, just have kind of a whole different environment and a whole different way of living. Is there any similarities or differences, or is it pretty much all grizzly bears are the same?
Yeah, they're all the same. Grizzly bears are neat because they have the capacity to grow as long as the food supply will support that growth.
Okay. So they
So
can
the
get
bears
big
in
and fat.
coastal Alaska get really big because they have this super abundant, super rich food source to use to put towards growth. And so they can go over 1,000 pounds up to 1,500 pounds. Northwest Montana is really a berry-based economy. We have this huge wealth of berries, and they can get quite large eating berries. But really, to get big, you need meat. So sometimes, particularly on the east side of the divide where we have a much bigger elk population, bears can get quite a bit bigger because they have that protein source. So occasionally we see bears that'll hit 1,000 pounds here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But on the west side of the divide where they're eating primarily berries, typical big male is much more likely to be around 600 pounds.
Okay.
So this is a bear poop. It's on the trail. It's got some snow on it because it snowed last night. But if we kind of poke around in there, we can find all kinds of interesting things. Oh, it looks like mountain ash berries in there. Little orange berries. Little huckleberry leaf there. Well, you can see it's mostly vegetation. So you could say that this bear is eating primarily berries. Bears are opportunistic omnivores. They'll eat just about anything. But if you've noticed in the background here, we have a lot of snow. So it's fall now, it's getting cold. They're talking about temperatures in the single digits next week. So all the plants are dried out and frozen. All the berries are starting to drop off. So there's really not much for bears to eat. So what do? Bears are really cool because they hibernate over the winter. So when the food runs out, they go and dig themselves a den in the ground and they sleep in there for up to 6 months. And it's really cool because they stay in there and don't come out. They don't eat, they don't drink, they don't defecate, or they don't urinate for that whole time. So it's really quite an amazing physiological adaptation to a harsh winter climate that they've developed.
Gosh, John, I remember the first time I came to Glacier National Park. It was a while ago, but I came and the first hike I did was Grinnell Glacier, but this was like mid-October, and it was just me and my partner at the time, and we hiked up there. And as he was kind of walking up a knoll, I turned around and saw this massive grizzly bear. And it was just digging like crazy. You could see its hump moving. At the time, I didn't stick around for too long to figure out what it was digging for, but what would a bear up that high be looking for? What kind of things would it be digging for?
Well, he could have been digging some underground roots or tubers, you know, like biscuit root or glacier lily bulbs, or he could have been trying to dig up a hibernating ground squirrel.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Is there a time when they all start to head off for hibernation, or is that just very individualistic?
It's individualistic. They're facultative hibernators, which means they decide they can choose when they want to hibernate or not.
Okay.
So it has to do with food supply, you know, if they're getting enough to eat or not. Kind of depends on the weather. You know, is it really cold and snowy, or is it warm and sunny?
Right.
You know, that factors into it too.
Okay.
But typically, pregnant females go into the den first. So usually around the end of October is when they'll start looking for a den site. The adult males go in last. Sometimes we have adult males that'll stay out into January sometimes.
Oh, wow.
So, but yeah, the grizzly bears will typically go up way up high elevation sites to dig their dens.
Okay.
You know, like way up on these ridge tops up here.
Oh, wow, no way.
Where the black bears tend to den down low. A place like this would be a place you might find a black bear den.
What a difference. And that's always, as far as we know, been the case even before kind of the Western settlers came.
Yeah, the black bears are kind of tied to trees, you know, so they'll den underneath the roots of a tree, or sometimes in these creek bottoms you see these big old cottonwood trees, and they'll actually climb up in the cottonwood tree. If there's a hollow up high, they'll den high up in the tree too.
Yes, I remember seeing that on our webcam.
That's right. Yeah.
I bet the grizzly bear is always kind of getting, and when they're up high, what kind of den are they making? Is it in rock?
Typically they dig a den, so they need soil.
Okay.
They'll excavate it, and sometimes you can spot them because all that dirt that they dig out will be piled up in front of the den entrance. We call it the porch.
Yes, the porch.
Sometimes they use rock caves, but that's more the exception than the rule. I think because they tend to be colder.
Yeah,
you know, a burrow in the ground can be quite cozy, and they'll line it with bear grass.
Oh, hey, no wonder. We finally know why it's called bear grass.
That's right.
And other materials to make it nice and warm.
Yep.
And, okay.
And they can be quite large. I went into a den once that had been occupied by a sow with 3 2-year-olds.
Whoa!
So that's a lot of bear packed into a hole in the ground. And
that's a lot of digging.
Yep. Yeah, I could sit in there upright, cross-legged, and the remote for the TV was there, so I could channel flip.
Some people believe that the word Yosemite comes from the word for grizzly bear. Grizzly bears have a very strong connection to Yosemite, although it's been a very long time since we've seen one in Yosemite.
The places where people live now were fully populated by grizzly bears. Grizzly bears dining on whale carcasses on the beach, where now people lounge and relax. There were grizzly bears where Los Angeles is now. There were lots of grizzly bears where San Francisco is today. So to go from 10,000 grizzly bears estimated to live in California at the time of statehood to none by 1925, 75 years later, is really quite startling. We have lost something that we're mostly not aware of, something that used to be so numerous, and we hunted them to extinction. The grizzly bear's presence in Yosemite was one of the many things that added to its wildness that we're now missing. And I think it's important for us to know about where the name Yosemite comes from. We have a fascinating account from 1887 written up by a rancher named Robert Wellman, who describes the killing of what some consider to be the last grizzly in Yosemite. Wellman is a stockman. He's running cattle near a place called Crescent Lake in the south part of Yosemite. And he finds a carcass of one of his cattle, and he finds bear tracks around this carcass, and he realizes there's a grizzly bear here. So he goes to Jim Duncan, who's his nearest neighbor. Duncan is a bear hunter. Duncan is skeptical, but he sees the size of the track, and he says, honest to goodness, this is a grizzly bear. Let's see what we can do to get it. It takes them several days of hard work, but they are successful in killing the grizzly, which Jim Duncan then sells to Thomas Hill, the Yosemite painter, who displays the hide on the walls of his studio in Wawona. Eventually, the grizzly pelt is given to the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology in Berkeley, and that's where it is today. It's one of the very few remnants of the last of the California grizzlies.
Going out on a landscape filled with grizzly bears is not the same as, going to the mall and seeing wolves bring down an elk or seeing two wolf packs clash right in front of you are life-altering events. There's no question we are changing people's lives by having places like Yellowstone. And the Northern Range is probably the heart of the park, and the park's the heart of the ecosystem. So it's all built upon each other, but at ground zero is the Northern Range.